It was a chilly autumn morning when Mr. Thompson, an elderly farmer, decided to take a trip to the city. For weeks now, he had been meaning to visit his children, both of whom had long since left their small hometown to build their lives in the city. His daughter, Sarah, worked as a lawyer, while his son, Jack, had become a successful entrepreneur. The thought of seeing them again filled him with warmth, a feeling that made the hours-long bus ride feel like nothing more than a brief journey. Arriving at the towering glass and steel building in the heart of the city, Mr. Thompson marveled at its size. He had never been inside such a grand structure before, and though the building was filled with the buzz of young professionals and the hum of elevators, Mr. Thompson felt a pang of discomfort. He was, after all, just a simple man in work boots and a worn denim jacket, the scent of fresh earth still clinging to him. It was a world far removed from his own. But there was no time for hesitation. He was determined to see his children. Walking slowly towards the elevator, Mr. Thompson noticed a young woman standing near the entrance. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her gaze was cold as she looked him up and down, her expression one of clear disapproval. Emily, the receptionist, was known for her no-nonsense attitude. She was efficient, punctual, and valued professionalism above all. As Mr. Thompson stepped into the elevator, he offered her a polite smile and muttered, "I'm just here to see my kids. They work on the 10th floor." He spoke with a soft voice, the kind of gentle tone one uses when speaking to strangers. But Emily wasn't interested in hearing his explanation. "Excuse me," she said sharply, her tone dismissive. "This elevator is for employees only. You'll have to leave." Confused, Mr. Thompson tried to explain again. "I'm just visiting my children. They work here. No exceptions." Emily cut him off, her eyes scanning his appearance with a look that seemed to size him up in an instant. "You're not supposed to be here." Before he could respond, Emily stepped forward and, without hesitation, pushed him out of the elevator. Mr. Thompson, caught off guard by the forceful motion, stumbled backward. The door slammed shut in his face, the soft hum of the elevator's ascent the only sound in the otherwise quiet lobby. For a brief moment, Mr. Thompson stood there, stunned, struggling to make sense of what had just happened. Was it his appearance? His clothes? He felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment, the sting of rejection a harsh contrast to the warmth he'd felt moments earlier. He wasn't sure how long he stood there before he found the courage to move again. Slowly, he turned around and walked toward the stairwell. The elevator had already ascended, and the thought of waiting for another ride seemed like an endless, humbling task. With a sigh, he began climbing the stairs, 10 flights, his legs protesting with each step. But the thought of seeing his children kept him going, pushing through the discomfort, through the embarrassment. What surprised him most, however, was the silence in his mind as he climbed. The anger he expected to feel wasn't there. Instead, a deep sense of sadness lingered, like a dull ache in his chest. This sadness wasn't just about what had happened, it was about the realization that people like Emily existed. That kindness, empathy, and simple understanding were often overlooked in a world so focused on appearances and efficiency. By the time he reached the 10th floor, he was winded, his legs aching and his back damp with sweat. But when he finally reached Sarah and Jack's office, the smile on their faces when they saw him made every step worth it. Little did he know, that moment in the elevator would set off a chain of events that would change the lives of everyone involved, his own, Emily's, and even Sarah and Jack's. It would test the values of compassion, forgiveness, and understanding, pushing everyone to face not only their own prejudices but also the way they treated others, especially when life's pressures and judgments clouded their perception of what truly mattered. When Mr. Thompson arrived home after his visit to the office, the weariness of the long climb up the stairs still lingered in his bones. But the exhaustion was nothing compared to the mix of emotions that churned within him. His mind kept replaying the moment in the elevator. The sting of Emily's harsh words. The coldness in her eyes. That evening, as he sat by the fire in his small farmhouse, Mr. Thompson received a call from his son, Jack. Jack had been on a business trip, but upon hearing about the incident from his sister, Sarah, he was furious. His voice was tight with frustration as he spoke. "Dad, I can't believe she treated you like that. You've been nothing but kind to everyone. And Jack's voice trailed off. I'll make sure something is done about it. I don't want to cause any trouble, Jack." Mr. Thompson responded, his voice calm, though his heart ached. "I just wanted to see you both. It's not worth making a fuss over." But Jack wouldn't hear of it. He was a man who stood up for what he believed in, and he wasn't about to let someone treat his father like that. The next day, he made the necessary calls, and within hours, an internal investigation was set up at the company. The next morning, Sarah called her father. "Dad, the company's having a meeting. They want to get to the bottom of what happened in the elevator." "I'll be there too," she said, trying to reassure him. "We'll handle it together." Mr. Thompson hadn't expected things to escalate this quickly, but he agreed to attend, though he still felt uneasy about the entire situation. Was this really necessary? His primary concern had been to see his children, not to cause trouble. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized how important it was to address what had happened, to speak up for kindness and understanding. At the meeting, Emily was visibly uncomfortable. The security footage, which had captured every detail of the confrontation, was played on the large screen for everyone to see. There she was, pushing Mr. Thompson out of the elevator, her expression cold and dismissive. Sarah, seated next to him, could barely hide her frustration as she watched the footage. Jack was seething, his fists clenched at his sides. When the video finished, the room fell silent. The evidence was irrefutable, and Emily knew it. Her eyes flickered from the screen to Mr. Thompson, then quickly away. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights, and the guilt was palpable in her posture. I didn't mean to be so harsh." Emily finally spoke, her voice shaky. I thought he was just some stranger trying to get in. I didn't realize." "That's the problem," Mr. Thompson interjected, his voice steady but filled with a quiet sorrow. "You didn't take the time to understand. You didn't try to see me as a person. You only saw what you wanted to see." He paused, his gaze softening as he continued. "We're all human, Emily. Everyone deserves the benefit of the doubt. We don't judge people by how they look, but by how they treat others." There was a long pause before anyone spoke again. Emily's face was flushed, and though she didn't say another word, her silence spoke volumes. The meeting ended soon after, but not before the company's management issued an apology and emphasized the importance of empathy and respect in the workplace. As Mr. Thompson left the office building that afternoon, he felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. The situation, though unpleasant, had given him a chance to speak his mind, to express the values he held dear, values that Emily, perhaps, had not yet fully understood. It was the beginning of a much-needed shift, not just in Emily's behavior, but in how everyone in the company viewed each other. And yet, for Mr. Thompson, it was not the apology or the investigation that mattered most. It was the lesson, the reminder that compassion, understanding, and kindness could break through the hardest of hearts, even in the most unexpected circumstances. The days after the office meeting were heavy for Emily. She had thought the whole situation would blow over, that she could simply continue her life as if nothing had happened. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. The guilt gnawed at her, a persistent ache that wouldn't go away. For the first time in years, she was forced to confront the truth about herself. Emily had always prided herself on her professionalism, on her ability to keep things under control. But the confrontation with Mr. Thompson had shown her something she couldn't ignore, her inability to truly understand the people around her. The way she had treated him, the way she had judged him without a second thought, shamed her. In the weeks that followed, Emily struggled with the weight of her actions. She tried to bury the guilt by working harder. But it didn't work. Her thoughts kept returning to that moment in the elevator. She had been so quick to assume, so eager to protect the order of her world, that she had ignored the basic principle of human decency, respecting others as equals, regardless of their appearance or background. The turning point came one quiet evening as Emily sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through social media. An ad popped up for a course on soft skills and emotional intelligence. It was something she had never considered before. Her job was about efficiency and results, not emotions and understanding. But something inside her nudged her to click on the link. As the days passed, Emily found herself enrolled in the course, reluctant but determined to make a change. The course was eye-opening. She learned about the importance of active listening, the power of empathy, and the devastating impact of unconscious biases. It wasn't an easy journey. She had to confront a lot of uncomfortable truths about herself. The way she distanced herself from others, thinking her professional success would shield her from the need for personal connection. How she'd overlooked the feelings of those around her in her pursuit of perfection. Emily spent hours reflecting on her past actions. And slowly, she began to see how they had shaped her into someone who was quick to judge and slow to understand. The realization was painful. But it was also freeing. It was the first step toward becoming someone she could be proud of. Months passed, and Emily's perspective on the world began to shift. She wasn't the same person who had pushed Mr. Thompson out of that elevator. She had started to become someone who took the time to understand others, who listened without judgment, and who saw value in the things that truly mattered: human connection, compassion, and respect. One day, Emily received a call from a recruitment agency offering her a new job. They wanted her to join a company known for its emphasis on values and emotional intelligence in leadership. As she prepared for the interview, she reflected on the journey she had taken, the lessons she had learned, and the person she had become. When the day of the interview arrived, Emily was nervous. But she felt something different now. Confidence. Yes, but it was a confidence rooted in self-awareness and growth, not arrogance. She entered the room with humility, openly sharing her story about her past mistake, about the lessons she'd learned and the changes she had made. The interviewers appreciated her honesty, and it was clear that they saw something different in her, a depth of character that had not been there before. After the interview, Emily left the building with a sense of peace. She knew that whatever happened, she had made the right choice. She was no longer running away from her flaws. Instead, she was embracing them and learning from them. It wasn't about perfection, it was about growth, and about becoming a better person every day. A year had passed since Emily's fateful meeting with Mr. Thompson. In that time, her life had changed in ways she hadn't expected. She had grown both professionally and personally, and her newfound understanding of human connection had started to influence the way she approached relationships, work, and life in general. It was at a corporate networking event that Emily crossed paths with Sarah again. Sarah. You remember her, the young woman who had witnessed the entire scene with Mr. Thompson and had been the one to speak up at the meeting. Sarah had been a bit more reserved in that meeting, quietly observing. But today, she looked confident and well put together. They hadn't spoken much after the event, but Sarah had sent her a message a few months ago, thanking Emily for the changes she had made and for encouraging her to pursue the same journey of growth. Emily had been touched by the message. But the truth was, she hadn't expected to see Sarah again. As Emily entered the venue, she scanned the crowd, her eyes catching the familiar face of Sarah across the room. Sarah's eyes met hers, and a small smile played on her lips. It was as though the past had come full circle. They moved towards each other, and as they exchanged greetings, Emily could feel a warmth in the air between them, a mutual understanding. a silent acknowledgement of the growth both had experienced. The conversation quickly shifted to work. Emily shared her recent promotion, a new role where she was leading a team focused on integrating emotional intelligence into their company culture. Sarah, on the other hand, spoke about how she had shifted her perspective on leadership and had started using her own voice to help foster inclusivity and empathy in her workplace. They both spoke with passion and conviction, their words laced with a sense of purpose and awareness. "Emily, I've seen such a difference in you," Sarah said, her tone sincere. "When we first met, you were so focused on doing things right that you forgot to ask whether the way you were doing them was kind." Emily nodded, grateful for Sarah's honesty. "I know," she said softly. "I've learned a lot since then. I've realized that success isn't just about being efficient or getting things done. It's about how you treat people along the way. It's about kindness, about listening, and understanding." Sarah smiled. "And you've been a great example of that change. I admire you, Emily. Your journey has inspired me to keep evolving, too." The conversation continued. But it was clear that this was no longer just about work. It was a reunion of two people who had grown, who had learned from each other, and who now shared a deeper connection than before. As the evening wore on, the event drew to a close. Emily and Sarah exchanged goodbyes, but not before sharing a final, meaningful moment. They shook hands. But this time, it was more than just a gesture. It was a symbol of respect, of mutual admiration, and of the lessons they had learned along the way. "Thank you, Emily," Sarah said, her voice warm. "You've shown me that it's never too late to change." Emily smiled, feeling the weight of those words. "Thank you, Sarah, for reminding me that we're all on this journey together." As she left the venue, Emily felt a sense of peace that she hadn't known before. The past year had been one of deep personal growth. But this moment, the reunion with Sarah, was the culmination of it all. She had finally come to understand that the power of change wasn't just about transforming yourself. It was about inspiring others, too. And in that shared growth, there was something even more profound, a sense of interconnectedness that tied them all together. It's funny how life works sometimes. You think you've already learned the hardest lessons, but then the universe throws you a curveball to see if you've really understood. Just when Emily thought she had everything figured out, life reminded her that growth is a constant process. Several months after her reunion with Sarah, Emily found herself facing a situation she hadn't anticipated. She was working on a large project at her new company, helping a team of bright but inexperienced individuals navigate a complex client proposal. The work was challenging but exciting. It pushed her to use every ounce of emotional intelligence and leadership skill she had acquired in the past year. Yet, just as she thought things were going smoothly, an issue arose that threatened to derail everything. It began with an anonymous leak. Sensitive information from their client had surfaced on a competitor's website. A clear violation of confidentiality. Emily's first instinct was to go straight to her boss, explain the situation, and try to figure out who was responsible. But as she began to dig into the details, she discovered something unsettling. The leak didn't just come from anyone, it had come from within the company. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Someone in her own team had betrayed their trust. Someone who she had worked closely with. Someone she had mentored and supported. It was hard to accept. And Emily felt a deep sense of betrayal. How could this happen? She had always encouraged openness and honesty within the team. And yet this breach felt like a slap in the face. But Emily's biggest shock came when she discovered that the person responsible was none other than Sarah, yes. The same Sarah who had helped her learn the value of empathy and change. Emily's heart sank as she saw Sarah's name on the leaked documents. She couldn't believe it. Sarah had grown so much in the past year. How could she make such a reckless decision? But the more Emily thought about it, the more she realized that Sarah was still, in many ways, a work in progress. Maybe she had been tempted by the lure of quick success or pressured by circumstances she hadn't shared. It was hard to say. But what was certain was that this was an opportunity for Emily to prove that the lessons she had learned weren't just about kindness, they were about integrity. 2. Instead of reacting impulsively, Emily took a step back. She had learned in the past year that people aren't defined by their mistakes, they're defined by how they handle them. She decided to confront Sarah privately before going any further. The meeting took place in Emily's office. A quiet space filled with the hum of late afternoon. Sarah looked uneasy as she sat down across from Emily. The weight of what had happened hanging in the air between them. The silence was thick. But Emily broke it softly. "Sarah, I know about the leak," she said. Her voice calm but firm. "And I need to understand why this happened." There was no defensiveness. No excuses from Sarah. Instead, she broke down. I didn't know what else to do," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "The pressure was too much. I thought if I gave them the information, we could win this deal. And I could prove myself. I didn't think about the consequences." As Sarah spoke, Emily felt the old emotions rise: anger, disappointment, but she pushed them aside. This was a moment to show empathy, to extend the same understanding that Sarah had once given her. "I understand," Emily said quietly, "but there are always consequences, Sarah. And the trust we build with others is one of the most important things we have. But this isn't the end for you. You still have a chance to make this right." The conversation didn't end there. But over the following days, Emily helped Sarah navigate the difficult path of owning up to her actions. Together, they worked on finding a solution, taking the necessary steps to resolve the situation and restore trust within the team. Emily didn't just act as a manager, she acted as a mentor, offering Sarah guidance and showing her the importance of owning her mistakes. In the end, it wasn't just about fixing the leak or managing the fallout, it was about teaching Sarah the true meaning of integrity. And Emily realized something important in that process. Change doesn't come from a single moment of growth, it comes from facing your darkest moments with courage and accountability. Months passed, and life in the office began to return to a new normal. The incident with Sarah was a turning point for both of them. Emily had learned that leadership wasn't just about achieving success, it was about guiding others through their struggles, helping them grow, and understanding that mistakes, while painful, could serve as stepping stones for personal transformation. As for Sarah, she had worked hard to regain the trust of her colleagues, and she'd come out stronger. She became an advocate for transparency and honesty in the office, using her experience to mentor others. But there was one more lesson Emily needed to learn, a lesson that would shape the way she viewed her own role as a leader. One afternoon, a company-wide meeting was held, and Emily was asked to present her team's progress on the big client proposal. She stood in front of her colleagues, feeling a sense of accomplishment. Her team had come so far, and despite the setbacks, they had pulled through. The presentation was flawless, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. As she wrapped up her talk, Emily felt a deep sense of pride, but also an unexpected feeling, something like uncertainty. After the meeting, her boss, Michael, called her into his office. He congratulated her on the success of the project. But then, with a serious tone, he said something that stopped her in her tracks. "You've done great, Emily. But now, we need you to take on more. We're looking at a bigger role for you. One where you can influence not just your team, but the entire company. We believe you have the potential to lead at a higher level." The words felt like a compliment, but also a weight. Emily had never imagined herself in such a position. She'd always been a team player, someone who worked behind the scenes, guiding her colleagues, offering support, and listening. The idea of stepping into a more visible leadership role filled her with anxiety. She wasn't sure she was ready. Would she be able to lead with the same empathy and understanding that had helped her navigate her own personal growth? That evening, as she walked home from the office, Emily found herself lost in thought. She thought about the long journey she had been on, the lessons learned from her own mistakes. the guidance she had received from mentors, and the way Sarah had taught her the importance of second chances. But most of all, she thought about the future and the kind of leader she wanted to be. As she sat down in her favorite spot by the window, looking out at the city lights, she realized that leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real, about being able to show vulnerability while still taking responsibility. It was about being able to face the tough situations with integrity, just like she had with Sarah. Emily had already come so far on her journey of personal growth. She had the wisdom to know that growth never really stops, and the future would continue to offer challenges that would test her in new ways. But she also knew she was ready for whatever came next. She had a newfound confidence, not the kind that came from having all the answers, but the kind that came from knowing she could navigate uncertainty, learn from mistakes, and lead with heart. When Emily walked back into the office the next day, she felt different, stronger, more at peace with herself. She knew that the road ahead would have its obstacles, but she was no longer afraid to take on whatever came her way. Because leadership was not just about power or position, it was about understanding, compassion, and the willingness to grow, even when the journey was difficult. And so, as Emily took the next step in her career, she did so with the certainty that she had found her true purpose, not in the title she would one day hold, but in the way she chose to lead. Day by day, moment by moment. As the months turned into years, Emily and Sarah each found themselves looking back on the journey that had brought them to where they were now. Both had grown, both had stumbled, learned, and risen. Their paths had intertwined in unexpected ways, but they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more empathetic. Each of them had drawn their own profound lessons from the challenges they faced, and each would carry those lessons with them as they moved forward. Emily had come to understand something fundamental about leadership. It wasn't about the polished speeches or the accolades, it was about showing up as your true self, flaws and all. It was about creating space for others to do the same. Through her experience with Sarah, Emily had learned that the real strength of a leader wasn't in their ability to be perfect, but in their willingness to be human. She realized that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a source of connection. The ability to admit mistakes, to apologize, to learn, and to grow, these were the qualities that made a leader not just respected, but deeply trusted. As she sat in her office one evening, thinking about all the decisions ahead of her, Emily smiled to herself. She had come a long way from the person who once felt like she wasn't ready for more responsibility. Now, she knew that true leadership was about guiding others with empathy and courage, not about trying to be flawless. She had the confidence to embrace her imperfections and lead from that place of authenticity. For Sarah, the journey had been one of humility. She had learned the hard way that redemption wasn't something you could expect to be handed to you, it was something you had to earn. Through actions, sincerity, and time. After her fallout with Emily, she had taken a hard look at her own behavior and realized how quickly she had let her ego cloud her judgment. She had assumed that her position in the company meant she could treat others however she wanted, without consequence. But as the months passed, Sarah worked tirelessly to rebuild the relationships she had damaged, proving not just to Emily, but to herself, that she could be a better person. She took on mentorship roles, shared her story with others, and helped guide colleagues through difficult situations. She found strength in vulnerability, something she had once considered a weakness. The humbling experience had made her more compassionate, more aware of the impact her actions had on others. In her heart, Sarah understood now that the most profound transformation didn't come from a change in status or power, it came from being willing to confront your own mistakes and work diligently to fix them, no matter how long it took. Michael, the boss who had been there through all of this, also took something valuable away from the experience. He had always believed in the power of second chances. But after witnessing the growth of both Emily and Sarah, he realized just how powerful they truly could be. Giving someone the opportunity to make things right could sometimes feel risky. But it was the only way to cultivate true loyalty, growth, and innovation. He had seen Sarah, once a troubled employee, blossom into a trusted leader in her own right. And Emily, whom he had seen initially as just a good team player, was now taking on greater responsibilities, showing him the depth of her capabilities. Michael knew that the strength of his leadership team wasn't just in their individual successes, but in their ability to support each other, learn together, and, when needed, offer second chances. For Michael, the biggest lesson was clear: it wasn't just about hiring the right people, it was about being the kind of leader who believed in others, even when they couldn't believe in themselves. As Emily, Sarah, and Michael each moved forward, they carried with them the lessons they had learned: the power of vulnerability, the importance of redemption, and the impact of second chances. They had all experienced their own versions of failure. Yet they had also learned that failure wasn't the end, it was simply a part of the journey. What mattered was how they chose to rise after the fall. And so, as they faced new challenges, both in their careers and personal lives, they did so with a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. They knew that success wasn't about never making mistakes, it was about how you responded to them, how you used those moments to learn and grow. In the end, their stories weren't just about professional achievements or climbing the corporate ladder, they were about the human connection, the shared experiences of vulnerability, forgiveness, and growth that made life truly meaningful. They had learned that leadership, redemption, and trust were not just concepts but ways of living, principles that shaped not only their careers, but their lives as a whole. And as they looked to the future, they knew that whatever came next, they were ready, together,